The Great Hall of Vithara Prime was a wonder of the galaxy. Its walls were made of living crystal that shifted colors with the mood of the crowd. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform, and every seat was filled. Over 4,000 species had sent their best speakers, their wisest leaders, and their loudest voices to the 90th Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council. In the very last row, far from the light and far from the attention, sat a small group of 5 humans. They wore simple dark suits. They carried no weapons. They had no banners. Their leader was a woman named Lena Vasquez. She had brown skin, tired eyes, and a calm face that gave nothing away. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched everything. She had been doing this for 12 years, watching, listening, writing notes on a small device hidden in her sleeve. And never, not once, speaking into the microphone on her desk, the galaxy had noticed. At first, decades ago, the other species had been curious about the humans. Earth had appeared on the galactic stage 60 years earlier, when their scientists cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. A young species, people said, primitive but promising. They were given a minor seat on the council, and everyone expected them to be eager, loud, and desperate to prove themselves like most new species were. But Earth said nothing. Year after year, assembly after assembly, the human delegation arrived on time, sat in the back, and never once raised a motion, asked a question, or made a speech. They voted on nothing. They joined no alliances. They signed no trade deals. They simply sat and watched. Curiosity turned to confusion. Confusion turned to irritation. And irritation, as it always does among the powerful, turned to mockery. The worst of it came from the Draelith Imperium. The Draelith were tall, silver-skinned beings with 4 arms and voices that carried like thunder. They had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 6,000 years, and their leader, Archon Solvek, treated the Grand Assembly like his personal stage. He was old, even by Draelith standards. His eyes were black as deep space, and when he smiled, it never reached them. Today Solvek was in a fine mood. He had just finished a long speech about the glory of the Elder Six, the 6 ancient civilizations that had shaped the galaxy since before most species learned to make fire. The crowd had cheered. They always did. When Solvek spoke, you cheered or you regretted it later. Now he paused and looked up toward the back rows where the humans sat. His black eyes found Lena Vasquez. She did not look away. "I see our Terran friends are here again," Solvek said into the chamber speakers. His voice echoed off the crystal walls. "Tell me, Ambassador, will this be the year you grace us with a word? Even one? A hello, perhaps?" Laughter rippled through the hall. Thousands of alien voices, clicking and buzzing and roaring in amusement. Vasquez said nothing. She blinked once and kept watching. Solvek tilted his head. "No? Nothing? You know even the wild beasts of Korath 4 make sounds when you poke them. Perhaps we should reclassify the Terrans as a pre-verbal species." The laughter was louder this time. Even some of the smaller, friendlier species joined in. It was easy to laugh at the quiet ones. It cost nothing, and it made you feel bigger. Vasquez wrote something on her hidden device. 2 words. Solvek, overconfident. When the assembly ended, she walked back to the human shuttle without speaking to anyone. Her team followed in silence. Once the doors closed and the shuttle lifted away from Vithara Prime, one of her aides, a young man named Tomas, finally spoke. "How long do we have to take this?" he asked. His jaw was tight. His hands were fists. Vasquez looked out the window at the stars. "As long as it takes," she said. "They called us animals, Lena." "I know what they called us. So when do we respond?" She turned to him with eyes that were not angry but steady, like deep water. "When we are ready, and not 1 second before." Back on Earth, the recording of Solvek's speech arrived at the office of the Secretary General within the hour. Io Osei watched it alone in his study. He was a tall man, from Lagos, with gray hair and large hands that he kept very still when he was thinking. He watched Solvek's mocking face, and when it was done, he closed the screen and sat in the dark for a long time. Then he called his chief of staff. "Tell Admiral Achebe that Phase 4 of Stillwater is approved," he said. "Full acceleration. I want it done within 2 years." "Yes, sir. And the council?" "Let them laugh. We are not ready yet." The call ended. Osei stood and walked to his window. Outside, the city of Geneva sparkled in the night. Cars moved, people walked, children slept in warm beds. None of them knew what was being built in their name. 6,000 meters below the Pacific Ocean, in a cavern so large it had its own weather, the shipyards of Project Stillwater worked without rest. Machines the size of mountains shaped metal that the galaxy had never seen. Engineers from every nation on Earth worked side by side, building things they had only dreamed of 10 years ago. The designs came from 60 years of watching, listening, and learning from every species in the galaxy. Humanity had taken the best ideas from 4,000 civilizations and improved on all of them. In Dock 7, the largest ship ever built by human hands, was nearly complete. It had no name yet. It was just a hull, dark and smooth, shaped like a blade. But when the dock lights hit it at the right angle, it seemed to drink the light and give nothing back. A young engineer named Priya stood on a walkway above the ship and stared. Her supervisor walked up beside her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "It's terrifying," she whispered. He nodded. "Good, it's supposed to be." Far above them, the ocean was calm, the world was quiet, and somewhere in the galaxy, Archon Solvek slept peacefully, certain that the humans were nothing to worry about. He would learn otherwise, but not today. Today, Earth was still patient, still watching, still quiet. And the silence was almost over. 2 years passed. The galaxy moved on, as it always did. Empires traded, species argued, and the powerful stayed powerful. Earth remained in its corner of the stars, quiet as ever. Most species had stopped thinking about the humans altogether. They were furniture, background noise, a joke that was no longer funny enough to tell. But the galaxy was about to change, and it started with the Velnari. The Velnari were a gentle people. They were small, blue-skinned, with large, dark eyes that always looked a little sad. They had no army. They had never built a weapon. For 3,000 years, they had been scholars, healers, and keepers of knowledge. Their libraries held the histories of 100 dead civilizations. Their doctors had cured plagues that no one else could touch. They were loved by many and protected by no one. Their homeworld, Velnara, sat near the edge of Dralith space. For centuries, the Dralith had left them alone. Their medicine was good, and their libraries were valuable. But times changed. Archon Solvek needed new territory to feed his empire's hunger, and Velnara sat on top of rare mineral deposits that his fleets needed. The invasion came without warning. Dralith warships filled the sky above Velnara like a dark cloud. They bombed the capital first, then the hospitals, then the libraries. Thousands of years of knowledge burned in a single afternoon. The Velnari had no shields, no fighters, no way to stop it. They could only run. Their leader, an old scholar named Vetha, sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council. She begged for help. She reminded them of every plague the Velnari had cured, every history they had saved, every kindness they had shown. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Behind her, through the window, fires burned on the horizon. The council called an emergency session. Species from across the galaxy watched and waited. Surely, people said, the Elder Six would act. Surely they would not let this stand. The vote was quick. The Elder Six, led by Solvek himself, declared the invasion a regional border matter and refused to intervene. One by one, the great powers voted no. It was not their problem. It was not their people. It was not their concern. Vetha's face, broadcast across 1,000 worlds, showed no surprise. Only sorrow. She had known. The powerless always know. Within weeks, billions of Velnari were homeless. Their ships were old and slow. They had nowhere to go. The galaxy had closed its doors. All except one. Earth opened its borders without a single announcement. No speeches, no press conferences, no demands for gratitude or payment. Human hospital ships jumped into Velnari space and began loading refugees by the hundreds of thousands. Terran engineers set up shelters on 3 of Earth's colony worlds. Food, water, medicine, and blankets arrived in endless streams. Human doctors worked beside Velnari healers, learning from each other, saving lives together. Lena Vasquez personally greeted the first refugee ship to arrive at Earth's Kepler colony. She stood on the landing platform as the doors opened, and a flood of frightened, exhausted Velnari stepped out into the sunlight of a world they had never seen. A small Velnari child, no older than 5, stumbled and fell at Vasquez's feet. The ambassador knelt down, picked the child up, and carried her to the medical tent herself. No cameras were there to record it. That was the point. But word traveled. It always does. And it reached the ears of Archon Solvek. He was furious. Not because Earth had done something wrong, but because Earth had done something right, and it made him look bad. The Velnari refugees were supposed to scatter and die in the dark spaces between stars. They were supposed to be forgotten. Instead, they were safe, warm, and telling every news network in the galaxy about the kindness of the humans. Solvek decided to act. At the next Grand Assembly, he took the central platform and pointed a long silver finger toward the empty seats where the human delegation usually sat. Vasquez was there, as always, quiet in the back row. The Terrans, Solvek began, his voice dripping with contempt, have once again proven their inability to understand how this galaxy works. They take in the weak. They waste resources on the broken. They sit in silence like animals, and then act without permission, without consultation, without the approval of this council. He paused and looked around the hall. Every eye was on him. I have tolerated the humans for 60 years. I have watched them sit in this hall like children at a grown-up's table. They contribute nothing. They say nothing. They are nothing. His voice rose. I move that we reclassify the species known as Homo sapiens as a pre-sapient dependent species, strip their council seat, and place their territories under the supervision of the Elder Six. A murmur swept through the hall. Some species shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. A few looked toward the back row, where Vasquez sat, very still. The vote was called. It was not close. The motion passed with overwhelming support. The Elder Six voted yes. Their allies voted yes. Even some of the smaller species, afraid of Solvek's anger, voted yes. The few who voted no were ignored. A council officer approached Vasquez with an official notice. Ambassador, your delegation is required to vacate the chamber. Earth is no longer recognized as a sapient member species. The hall was quiet. Everyone was watching. Some were smiling. Some were looking away. A few, very few, looked ashamed. Vasquez stood. She looked at the council officer, then past him across the vast hall, directly at Archon Solvek. He met her gaze with a smirk. Then she did something she had never done in 12 years. She reached down and pressed the button that activated her microphone. The soft click echoed through the silent chamber. 4,000 species held their breath. You will regret this, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. It was not a shout. It was not a threat. It was a fact. delivered with the same calm patience that had defined humanity's presence in the galaxy for 60 years. Then she turned and walked out. Her team followed. The doors closed behind them. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Solvek laughed, and the tension broke, and the assembly moved on to other business. The humans were gone. The joke was over. On Earth, Secretary General Osei watched the broadcast in real time. He watched Vasquez walk out. He watched the doors close. He watched Solvek laugh. Then he picked up his phone and called Admiral Roan Achebe. "It's time," Osei said. "Understood, sir," Achebe replied. His voice was steady and ready. He had been waiting for this call for a very long time. Deep beneath the Pacific, the shipyard doors opened for the first time in 30 years. Water rushed and parted as dark shapes rose from the deep, one after another, climbing toward the sky. They broke the surface of the ocean like giants waking from a long sleep. Droplets of seawater fell from their hulls and caught the sunlight, sparkling like diamonds. The fishermen on a nearby boat stared upward with their mouths open as the ships climbed past the clouds and kept going, up and up, until they were gone. One of the fishermen whispered to the other, "What was that?" The other man shook his head slowly. "That," he said, was the answer. 3 months after the vote, the galaxy had mostly forgotten about Earth. There were bigger things to worry about. Trade disputes, border wars, the usual noise of 1,000 civilizations tripping over each other in the dark. Humanity was a closed chapter, a footnote in the records of the Grand Assembly. Pre-sapient, dependent, done. Archon Solvek certainly was not thinking about the humans. He was thinking about the Velnari colonies that still existed inside what used to be Terran space. The refugees Earth had sheltered were an insult to him. Every day they breathed freely was a reminder that someone had defied his will. He wanted them back. He wanted them broken. And now that Earth had no legal standing in the galaxy, there was nothing to stop him. He gave the order on a cold Draelith morning. 300 warships, each one armed with enough firepower to crack a moon, jumped to faster-than-light speed and headed for the Terran border system of Kepler's Reach. The fleet commander was a seasoned warrior named Draven. He had fought in 11 campaigns and had never lost. He expected this to be the easiest mission of his career. "We will be home before the evening meal," Draven told his officers. They laughed and agreed. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Kepler's Reach. The system was unremarkable. A yellow star, 3 rocky planets, a thin asteroid belt, the kind of place you'd fly through without a second look. Draven opened his scanners and swept the system. What he saw made him lean forward in his command chair. Ships, human ships, everywhere. They filled the space between the planets, like a net woven from shadow and steel. 1,200 vessels, arranged in perfect formation, each one sleek and dark, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not blocky cargo haulers or clumsy patrol boats. Their hulls curved like the bodies of deep-sea creatures, smooth and eyeless, and built for one purpose. Draven stared at his screen. His mouth went dry. His officers had stopped laughing. A communication signal came through. A human face appeared on the main screen. The man was calm, dark-skinned, with close-cropped gray hair and steady brown eyes. He wore a simple uniform with no medals, no decorations, nothing to prove. His name was Admiral Roan Achebe, and he looked at Draven the way a teacher looks at a student who has made a very poor decision. "Draelith Fleet Commander," Achebe said. His voice was even and polite. "You have entered Terran sovereign space. I am asking you, clearly and respectfully, to turn your ships around and go home." Draven recovered his composure. He straightened in his chair and put on his warrior's face. Terran space, you have no space. You have no standing. The Council has declared your kind pre-sapient. You have no right to address me. HFY did not blink. The Council can declare whatever it likes. We are here. Our ships are here. And the people we are protecting are here. I will ask you one more time. Turn around. Draven cut the communication. He turned to his weapons officer. Open fire. All ships. Full barrage. 300 Dralith warships fired at once. The sky lit up with beams of blue-white energy that could melt through starship armor like a hot knife through paper. It was a wall of destruction, the kind of attack that had shattered 100 fleets before. It hit the Terran shields and disappeared. Not deflected, not absorbed, disappeared. The energy simply stopped existing. The Terran ships did not shake. They hung in space like they were bolted to the fabric of the universe itself, and the most powerful weapons the Dralith had built washed over them like rain on stone. Draven felt something he had not felt in 30 years of war. Fear. Fire again, he ordered. His voice cracked. They fired again, and again, and again. Nothing. The human fleet took every shot and gave back nothing but silence. Then Admiral HFY's face appeared on every Dralith screen simultaneously. Every ship, every console, every personal communicator. His voice was still calm. You have had your turn, he said. Now it is ours. The Terran fleet moved, not slowly, not carefully, but with a speed that should not have been possible for ships that size. They flowed around the Dralith formation like water around rocks, and then they struck. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. Human weapons did not burn or blast. They reached into the guts of the Dralith ships with invisible fingers, and simply turned things off. Weapons went dead. Engines went cold. Navigation systems went dark. Shield generators shut down like candles being snuffed. One by one, 300 Dralith warships went silent and began to drift. But the lights stayed on. Life support kept running. The air kept flowing. Not a single Dralith soldier died. When it was over, Draven sat in his dead command chair on his dead ship, staring at a dark screen, and listened to the sound of his own breathing. Around him, his officers sat in shock. Some were shaking. One was crying quietly. HFY's voice came through on a backup speaker, the only system the humans had left active. Commander Draven, your ships are disabled, but your crews are safe. Rescue and repair vessels will arrive shortly to tow you back to Dralith space. You will not be harmed. You have my word. There was nothing to say. Within hours, the battle footage leaked. No one knew how. It spread across every network, every news channel, every dark corner of the galactic internet. 4,000 species watched a fleet of 300 Dralith warships, the pride of the greatest military in the galaxy, get taken apart in 11 minutes by a species that had been classified as pre-sapient 3 months ago. And they watched the humans spare every single life. The reaction was immediate and enormous. On 100 worlds, people stopped what they were doing and stared at their screens. Military commanders ran new calculations. Intelligence officers tore through their files looking for anything about Terran capabilities and found nothing, because there was nothing. Humanity had hidden everything. For 60 years, they had shown the galaxy an empty hand while building a fist behind their back. And then came the broadcast. Secretary General Io Ose appeared on every channel in the galaxy. He stood behind a simple wooden desk with the flag of Earth behind him. He wore no crown, no armor, no symbols of war. He looked like what he was, a tired man who had hoped this day would never come. People of the galaxy, he said, for 60 years, humanity has sat among you in silence. We were mocked for this. We were insulted. We were stripped of our dignity and cast out like animals. We accepted it all because we were not ready, and because we believed that patience was a greater strength than pride. He paused and looked directly into the camera. We were quiet because we were listening. We were listening because we wanted to understand you. We understand you now. His voice dropped, not in anger, but in something heavier. And we are deeply disappointed. He let the words hang in the air. We did not build our fleet to conquer. We built it to protect. Today, we protected the Velnari refugees in our care, and the right of every species to live without fear. We destroyed no one. We killed no one. We asked for nothing in return. He straightened his shoulders. But let me be clear. We will not be silent any longer, and we will not be ignored. The broadcast ended. The galaxy was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was the quiet of 4,000 species realizing, all at once, that they had made a terrible mistake. And somewhere on the bridge of a Terran flagship, Admiral HFY sat alone, staring out at the stars, and whispered to no one in particular, "I wish they had just turned around." The days after the Battle of Kepler's Reach were chaos. Not the loud kind, with fire and screaming, but the quiet kind, where the ground shifts under your feet, and everything you believed turns out to be a lie. The Elder Six were in a panic. Behind closed doors, away from the public eye, their leaders scrambled to understand what had happened. The Dralith had the largest military in the galaxy, and 300 of their best ships had been turned off like broken toys. Intelligence teams across 6 civilizations tore through every scrap of data they had on humanity, and came up with almost nothing. Earth had been invisible for 60 years. No leaked blueprints, no intercepted communications, no defectors, nothing. But that was only the beginning of their problems, because Earth was not done. 3 weeks after the battle, strange things started happening across the galaxy. On the Dralith homeworld, a news network that had been controlled by the government for centuries suddenly published a document, a real one, verified and stamped with official seals, showing that Archon Solvek had personally ordered the destruction of the Velnari libraries, not because of mineral deposits, but because those libraries contained records of Dralith war crimes going back 2,000 years. He had burned the evidence, and now someone had found copies. On the Cathani Republic, another member of the Elder Six, citizens woke up to find their personal communication devices buzzing with a file that proved their elected Senate had been rigged for 400 years. The same 12 families had held power since before their species had left their home planet. Every election had been a performance. Every vote had been counted before it was cast. On the Orathi Collective, factory workers received evidence that their wages had been deliberately suppressed by a secret agreement between their government and 3 other Elder Six species. They had been kept poor on purpose, to keep them dependent, to keep them obedient. World after world, secret after secret, the truth came pouring out like water from a broken dam, and it all came from the same source, Project Stillwater. For 60 years, while humanity sat in silence at the Grand Assembly, they had been running the largest intelligence operation in the history of the galaxy. Every conversation overheard, every data stream intercepted, every secret meeting recorded. Human agents, disguised and embedded in 1,000 systems, had been patiently collecting the truth about the galaxy's power structure. And the truth was ugly. The Elder Six had not built their power on wisdom or strength. They had built it on lies, manipulation, and the careful oppression of every species beneath them. They had started wars to sell weapons. They had destroyed cultures to prevent competition. They had kept younger species ignorant and divided, so they would never unite and challenge the old order. And now everyone knew. Earth did not release this information to governments or to the Council. They released it directly to the people, to ordinary citizens on ordinary worlds, who had spent their lives believing that the system was fair, that their leaders were honest, that the galaxy worked the way they were told it did. The effect was like setting fire to dry grass. On 40 different worlds, protests erupted within days. On the Dralith homeworld, soldiers refused to report for duty. On Cathani, the fake Senate building was surrounded by 1 million citizens, demanding real elections. On Urathi, workers shut down every factory on the planet and stood in the streets holding signs that read, in their own language, "We know now." The Elder Six tried to respond. They called emergency meetings. They issued denials. They blamed human propaganda. But the documents were real, and everyone could see they were real, and no amount of shouting could put the truth back in the box. Solvek was desperate. He had spent his entire life building power, and now he could feel it crumbling under his feet like wet sand. He called the other leaders of the Elder Six on a secure channel, or what he thought was a secure channel. "We must unite," he said. "If we strike Earth now, together, with everything we have, we can end this before it spreads further." 3 of the 6 refused immediately. The Cathani were dealing with revolution at home. The Urathi leadership had already collapsed. The Ven Directorate quietly sent a back-channel message to Earth, asking for terms. They wanted to be on the winning side. But Solvek found 2 allies, the Thesserai Dominion and the Rakful Confederacy, both military powers with fleets large enough to matter, agreed to join him. Together, they assembled a grand armada of over 5,000 ships, the largest military force the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Solvek stood on the bridge of his flagship, a mountain of dark metal called the Eternal Will, and addressed his fleet. "Today we remind the galaxy who built it," he said. "Today we crush the humans and restore the natural order. They are clever. I will give them that. But cleverness is not power. We have always been power." The armada jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading straight for Earth's solar system. Admiral Achabi was waiting for them. The Terran fleet met the armada at the edge of the Sol system, just past the orbit of Neptune. Achabi had brought 600 ships, less than half the enemy's number. His officers looked at the scanner readings, and then looked at him. He was sitting in his command chair, drinking tea. "Sir," his first officer said carefully, "they outnumber us significantly." Achabi took a sip. "I know. Should we call for reinforcements?" "No need." He set down his cup. "Activate the Aegis." Deep within the sun itself, buried in layers of plasma and fire, machines that no other species knew existed came to life. They had been placed there 20 years ago by unmanned probes designed to survive temperatures that would melt anything the galaxy had ever built. The machines linked together, forming a network that stretched from the sun to the farthest edge of the solar system. The Aegis Network. It hit the Grand Armada like a wall of invisible force. Every weapon on every ship went dead at once, not disabled, not damaged, but locked out, as if they had never existed. Navigation systems froze. Faster-than-light drives refused to engage. 5,000 warships, the pride of 3 ancient empires, were suddenly helpless. They could not shoot. They could not run. They could only drift and stare at the small blue dot in the distance. That was Earth. Achabi's face appeared on Solvek's screen. "Archon Solvek," Achabi said. His voice was the same as always, calm and patient and almost kind. "Your weapons are offline. Your drives are locked. You cannot fight, and you cannot flee, but your life support is untouched, and your crews are safe." Solvek's 4 hands gripped the arms of his chair so hard, the metal bent. His face was twisted with rage and something deeper. Something that looked a lot like terror. "You cannot do this," he hissed. "You are insects. You are nothing. We are the species you called pre-sapient," Achabi said. "We are the ones who sat in the back row. We are the ones who watched and listened while you burned libraries, and starved workers and rigged elections, and laughed about it. He leaned forward slightly. Turn your ships around, Archon. Take your people home. Face them honestly, for the first time in your life. That is the only order I will give you today. The channel went dead. Solvek sat in silence for a long time. His officers stared at the floor. No one spoke. Then, slowly, the Aegis released its grip. Drives came back online. Navigation screens flickered to life. Weapons remained locked, but the ships could move. Solvek gave the order to retreat. He did not look at anyone as he said it. His voice was barely a whisper. The Grand Armada turned and limped away from Sol, 5,000 ships moving in silence through the dark, like a funeral procession for an empire that had already died. On Earth, Secretary General Osei stood at his window and watched the stars. His chief of staff came in with a report. "They are retreating, sir. All of them." Osei nodded slowly. "Good. The galaxy is watching. They want to know what we will do next." Osei was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We will do what we have always done. The right thing, even if it is the hard thing." He turned from the window. "Call Ambassador Vasquez. It is time to build something better." 1 year later, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The old Galactic Council was dead. Its crystal hall on Vithara Prime still stood, but the seats were empty and the lights were off. No one had voted to shut it down. It had simply stopped mattering. When the truth about the Elder Six came out, the trust that held the council together broke apart like glass, and no one saw a reason to pick up the pieces. In its place, something new was growing. The idea came from Earth, though the humans were very careful about how they presented it. Ambassador Vasquez spent 6 months traveling from world to world, not making speeches, not issuing demands, but sitting down with leaders and ordinary people and asking the same question everywhere she went. What do you want the galaxy to look like? The answers were surprisingly similar. People wanted fairness. They wanted their voices heard. They wanted to know that the powerful could not simply crush the weak whenever it suited them. They wanted the truth, even when it was ugly, because they had learned the hard way that lies were uglier. From those conversations, the Galactic Assembly of Equals was born. The rules were simple. Every species got 1 seat and 1 vote, regardless of how many ships they had or how old their civilization was. No species could be classified as lesser or greater than any other. Trade agreements had to be public. Military actions required open debate. And a new independent body, staffed by volunteers from every member world, would serve as an open intelligence service, making sure that no government could hide the truth from its own people ever again. The first session of the new assembly was held not on Vethara Prime, but on a small neutral station that the Velnari had helped design. It was modest, built from plain materials, with no crystal walls or towering stages. The seats were arranged in a single flat circle, so that every delegate looked across at every other delegate as an equal. Earth took a seat in that circle, not at the head, not in a special position, just 1 seat among thousands. Some species had expected the humans to crown themselves rulers of the galaxy. They had the military power for it. They had the intelligence. They had the moral authority that comes from being right when everyone else was wrong. 100 empires throughout history had taken less and built thrones from it. But when the new assembly offered Earth a permanent leadership role, Secretary General Osei declined. "We did not do this to replace one set of rulers with another," he said at the opening session. "We did this because ruling is the problem. The galaxy does not need a leader. It needs a mirror. Every species must see itself clearly and govern itself honestly. That is the only path that does not end in another Solvek." The chamber was quiet when he finished. Not the uncomfortable quiet of the old council, where silence meant fear. This was a respectful quiet. A thinking quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something new begins. The Velnari were among the first to take their seat. Their homeworld was being rebuilt, slowly but steadily, with help from Earth and 24 other species who had been moved by their suffering. The libraries were gone forever, but the Velnari had already started new ones. They were a people who understood that knowledge once lost must be rebuilt with even greater care. Their lead diplomat was a young woman named Sarah. She had been a child when the Dralith bombed her world. She had grown up in a refugee shelter on Kepler Colony, surrounded by humans who treated her with kindness they had no obligation to show. Now, she stood in the new assembly as the voice of her people, and when she spoke, everyone listened. After the first session, Sarah found Vasquez standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Ambassador," Sarah said quietly. Vasquez turned and smiled. She looked older than she had a year ago. The lines around her eyes were deeper, but the steadiness was still there, the same calm that had carried her through 12 years of silence and mockery. "Just Lena," Vasquez said. "I am not sure I'm an ambassador anymore. We are all just people now." Sarah stood beside her and looked out at the same stars. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Not for the fleet, not for the battle, for before that, for opening your doors when no one else would, for the blankets and the food and the doctors, for carrying that child off the shuttle. You did not know anyone was watching. That is the only time it counts," she said softly. "Anyone can be kind when there is a camera. The test is what you do when no one sees." Sarah nodded. She understood that better than most. Far from the new assembly, on the Dralith homeworld, Archon Solvek stood trial. Not before a human court, not before a galactic tribunal, before his own people. The evidence against him was overwhelming, all of it pulled from the files of Project Stillwater, verified by Dralith investigators who could no longer deny what their leader had done. The charges were long. War crimes against the Velnari, destruction of cultural heritage, conspiracy to suppress freedom across multiple star systems, fraud, corruption, murder by military order. The list went on for hours. Solvek sat in the defendant's chair, his forearms folded, his black eyes staring straight ahead. He did not apologize. He did not explain. When asked if he had anything to say, he said only, "I did what was necessary to maintain order." The court did not agree. He was found guilty on all counts. The Dralith Imperium, the empire he had spent his life building, was dissolved by the vote of its own citizens. In its place, a federation of free worlds emerged, each one governing itself, each one choosing its own path for the first time in 6,000 years. On Earth, things were quieter. The shipyards beneath the Pacific were still there, but they had shifted from building warships to building medical vessels, cargo transports, and deep space exploration ships. Admiral Achabi had retired, turning down every honor and title that was offered to him. He said he had done his job, and now he wanted to do something else. He bought a small house on a hill overlooking the ocean, in a village in West Africa where his family had lived for generations. He planted a garden. He cooked meals that took too long and tasted just right. Sometimes old friends visited, and they sat on his porch and talked about everything except the war. One afternoon, 6 months after the trial of Solvek, a Velnari family moved into the village. They were refugees who had been offered permanent homes on Earth. The father was a healer. The mother was a teacher. They had a daughter named Kia, who was 7 years old and afraid of everything, because she had spent her earliest years running from things that wanted to hurt her. Kia was shy around the humans at first. She hid behind her mother and peeked out with her big, dark eyes. But children are braver than they know, and within a week, she had found her way to Achabi's garden. He was kneeling in the dirt, planting tomatoes, when he heard small footsteps behind him. He turned and saw the Valnari girl standing at the edge of his garden, watching him with curiosity. "Hello," he said. She looked at the tomato plant in his hand. "Do you want to help?" he asked. She nodded slowly and walked over. He showed her how to dig a small hole, how to place the plant gently inside, how to press the soil around it with care. She listened with the same intense attention that the Valnari gave to everything, as if the world was a book and every moment was a sentence worth reading. When they finished, she looked up at him and smiled. It was a small smile, careful and new, like a flower that was not sure yet whether it was safe to open. Akabe smiled back. Secretary General Osei gave one final address before stepping down from office. He stood before the Galactic Assembly of Equals and spoke simply, the way he always did. "Many of you have asked me why humanity stayed quiet for so long," he said. "The answer is not complicated. We come from a world that nearly destroyed itself, not once, many times. We burned our forests, we poisoned our rivers. We built weapons that could kill every living thing on our planet, and we pointed them at each other. We came very close, more than once, to ending our own story." He paused and looked around the circle of faces, thousands of species, thousands of histories, all watching him. "We survived because in the end, we chose to listen instead of shout. We chose to build instead of burn. We chose patience over pride. When we came to the stars and found all of you, we made the same choice. We stayed quiet because we wanted to understand. We wanted to be sure that when we finally spoke, we had something worth saying." He straightened his shoulders one last time. "We have said what we needed to say. Now it is time for all of us to listen to each other." He stepped away from the platform, not the forced, fearful applause of the old council, but something warmer and more real, the sound of people who were choosing, freely, to hope. Back on the hill in West Africa, the sun was going down. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. The ocean glittered below like a field of scattered jewels. Achebe sat on his porch with a cup of tea growing cold in his hand. In his garden, Kia was running between the rows of tomato plants, laughing, chasing a butterfly that was always just out of reach. Her laughter carried on the warm evening breeze and mixed with the sound of the waves. He closed his eyes and listened. It was, he thought, the best sound in the universe. Earth was quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet of hiding, not the quiet of patience, not the quiet of a fist being built behind a still hand. It was the quiet of peace, earned, fought for, and shared freely with anyone brave enough to reach for it. And across the galaxy, for the first time in a very long time, the silence was not empty. It was full.